Many people who follow the royal family know that Queen Camilla became queen after King Charles III took the throne, while Prince William and Princess Catherine remain among the most trusted and respected figures in the monarchy. Now, however, claims are spreading that William and Catherine have confirmed Camilla will be stripped of her royal title once Charles's reign ends. Is there any truth behind these reports? Why would such a decision be made, and what would it mean for the future of the royal family if the claims prove accurate? For years, Camilla believed one thing without ever needing to say it aloud. As long as King Charles stood beside her, no one could take away the position she had spent so many years building. William might disagree with her. Catherine might keep her distance. Palace advisors might raise concerns. But Charles was the king, and Camilla trusted that his support would always protect her. Then an important meeting began. It took place behind closed doors inside Buckingham Palace, far from camera staff and the carefully chosen language usually used to conceal family disagreements. William arrived first, followed by Catherine. Charles and Camilla were already seated at the table. In the center lay a sealed file concerning the royal succession. It contained a decision that had already moved beyond debate. A senior advisor opened the file and read the first section. It stated that Camilla would remain queen for the rest of Charles's reign. But when that reign ended, her royal title authority within the household ceremonial status and influence would end with it. There would be no automatic role after Charles, no special protection, and no separate position of power during William's future reign. That was when William spoke, and the mood in the room shifted. He did not raise his voice or make personal attacks. Instead, he said calmly that the monarchy could not move into its next chapter while leaving unanswered questions about loyalty, privilege, and control. There could be only one monarch, one royal household, and one clear chain of authority. Camilla's future role, he explained, could not be placed above that principle. Catherine remained silent, yet her presence carried weight. Camilla had expected William to defend his future as king. Catherine's attendance showed that both of them supported the same decision. She was not there merely to observe. She was there to demonstrate agreement. The second page of the file was then opened. It listed several requests linked to Camilla's household retaining her staff influence over senior royal appointments, permanent access to royal residences, continued security after Charles's reign, and special arrangements for members of her family. Each request might have seemed reasonable on its own. Taken together, they appeared to create a royal household that could continue even after Charles was gone. Charles looked toward William, perhaps expecting hesitation. There was none. At that moment, Catherine leaned forward and made a point Camilla had not anticipated. She said that a royal title should always represent service to the crown. It should never become personal property, or be used to secure lasting advantages for relatives who held no official royal responsibilities. Camilla looked back at the document. She had faced years of public criticism, lived under the shadow of Princess Diana's memory, and waited a long time for the palace to accept her place. Now William and Catherine were making clear that her position had never been guaranteed forever. It would end when Charles's reign ended. Yet the most important page was still to come. It stated that the decision had already been entered into the royal succession plan and could not be quietly altered later. Camilla turned to Charles, hoping for reassurance. He avoided her gaze. At the bottom of the page was an authorization mark she recognized immediately. It did not belong to William. It did not belong to Catherine. According to the document, the decision affecting her future title had begun with Charles himself. Even that, however, was not the greatest surprise. The deepest concern, it seemed, still lay in the remaining pages William had not yet allowed her to read. For months, a palace team had been reviewing how the royal household would function after King Charles' reign ended. At first, the work appeared routine staff numbers, security residences, ceremonial duties, and other administrative matters not expected to provoke family disagreement. Then, new requests began to appear. One suggested that several members of Camilla's household should retain their positions even after Prince William became king. Another asked that people connected to Camilla continue to have a voice in appointments linked to charities, royal homes, and ceremonial offices. A third requested that certain travel security and accommodation benefits continue for individuals close to Camilla, even if they no longer held official royal duties. On their own, the requests did not appear extraordinary. Examined together, they looked like a larger plan. William had studied every document carefully before the meeting. He believed the household was preparing not merely to adjust to a new reign, but to preserve much of its influence after Charles was gone. Staff would remain. Access would remain. Influence would remain. Even if the title itself no longer carried the same official role, the system around it would still be in place. That was something William was not prepared to accept. Charles dismissed the concerns as administrative. He argued that Camilla had stood beside him for years, represented the crown-supported charities, and endured heavy public criticism. In his view, maintaining some continuity was not special treatment. It was protection for loyal staff who might otherwise lose their positions the moment William became king. William was not convinced. He asked why continuity required influence over appointments. He asked why it required ongoing access to certain royal residences. He asked why privileges belonging to the reigning queen should continue after the reign itself had ended, and why some of the requests involved members of Camilla's family rather than working royals with official responsibilities. The atmosphere grew tense. Camilla responded that her family had never chosen to become part of the royal family. Through her marriage, they had faced years of media attention, criticism, and invasion of privacy. The support mentioned in the documents, she said, was simply intended to protect them from difficulties they had never sought. Catherine listened quietly before asking a single question. What public service would those privileges represent? No one answered. That silence exposed the weakest point in the argument. Royal privileges could be defended when they enabled official duties. They became far harder to justify when they appeared to benefit family connections, personal loyalty, or private comfort. Catherine's concern was not only about internal rules. She was also thinking about how the public would eventually judge every resident staff position. Security arrangement and appointment. Charles shifted in his chair. He knew better than most how quickly public opinion could turn. Over the years, he had watched small financial matters grow into national controversies. He understood that one privilege that could not be properly explained might overshadow months of public service. Camilla refused to yield. She said William and Catherine were acting as though she were attempting to create a separate royal court. Camilla's expression changed for a moment. She said the wording had been prepared by palace officials. She had not written it herself and had not approved every sentence. Her office handled a large volume of paperwork every day, and not every document reached her for personal approval. That answer raised a further problem. If Camilla had not approved the requests, then someone in her office had been advancing plans without her knowledge. If she had approved them, then she had entered the meeting already aware of what William had uncovered. Either possibility was serious. A senior advisor then referred to earlier warnings. Camilla's office had been told several times that royal title staff, household arrangements, and special privileges would not automatically continue after the current monarch's reign ended. The message had been clear. It had not been followed. Even after those warnings, the requests continued. One was submitted 3 weeks after the first warning. Another followed a second meeting with constitutional advisors. The final request arrived only days before William and Catherine were called to review the succession documents. At that point, it could no longer be described as a misunderstanding. Charles looked at Camilla, waiting for an explanation. She remained silent. William stayed calm. Catherine then lifted a thinner folder from beneath the main file. It carried a... Camilla recognized at once. She had believed that meeting had been entirely private. She had also believed no written record of it existed. Catherine opened the folder and slid the first page across the table. It was not a letter. It was a transcript of a private conversation that had taken place months earlier between Camilla's household and palace advisors. One passage stood out. A palace official had stated clearly that the powers connected to the reigning queen could not automatically continue into the next reign. The reply from Camilla's side was short and direct. Find another route. Camilla read the sentence twice before looking at Catherine. For the first time that evening, the discussion became deeply personal. She asked whether Catherine truly understood what she was supporting. Her words carried years of pain and frustration. Catherine had entered the royal family with strong public support, William's protection, and the expectation that she would one day help lead the monarchy. Camilla's experience had been entirely different. She had faced years of criticism and long believed she would never be fully accepted as Charles's partner. She had waited many years before finally receiving her royal title. Now, in her view, Catherine was helping bring that chapter to a close. Catherine quietly closed the folder and rested both hands on the table. She answered calmly. She said she understood why the title meant so much to Camilla after everything she had endured. But personal sacrifice could not determine how the title should function once its constitutional purpose had ended. Her answer shifted the atmosphere in the room. Camilla was speaking about protecting what she had spent years building. Catherine was speaking about the limits of royal authority. Catherine said she respected the difficult years Camilla had faced. She recognized that Charles had chosen her, stood by her, and given her an important place during his reign. None of those things were being taken away. But a new reign could not be controlled by decisions or promises made during the previous one. A royal title was not a reward for past hardship. It was a position of service. And when that service ended, the authority connected to it should end as well. Camilla turned to Charles and asked whether he was truly willing to allow William and Catherine to reduce everything she had done beside him to nothing more than an official rule. Charles looked tired. He said calmly that no one was trying to erase her years of service. The discussion concerned only what would happen after his reign ended. That answer wounded Camilla more than an argument would have. Charles had already accepted the distinction between her past role and her future position. Camilla pushed the document back across the table. She insisted she had never seen the warnings. She said she had never authorized anyone to find a way around William's future authority. Her office handled a large number of documents every day. Some were only early drafts, and many never reached her desk. The senior advisor then opened another record. It showed that the warning had been sent directly to Camilla's private secretary. A receipt confirmed it had been opened. The next morning, a private meeting was added to Camilla's schedule. No subject was listed, and no official notes were taken. Later that same day, the phrase "continuation beyond the present sovereign" appeared in a revised request. Someone had clearly taken action. The only question was who. Camilla said her private secretary must have misunderstood the situation. William then asked whether that misunderstanding also explained the requests concerning royal home staff and family access. Camilla replied that palace officials often prepared multiple options before settling on one. Catherine listened quietly before asking why every proposal increased Camilla's future role instead of reducing it. Once again, no answer came. Charles suggested pausing the process while Camilla's office conducted its own investigation. He believed this would help separate her personal intentions from the actions of her staff. William shook his head. He said it was too late for an internal review. Camilla's household had already received warnings, yet continued submitting the same requests. The succession team believed that delaying the decision would only create larger problems for the next reign. Charles finally asked the question he had been avoiding. "Is this a punishment?" William answered without hesitation. "No, it is protection." He explained that it was not about protecting the monarchy from Camilla herself. It was about protecting it from confusion. There could not be competing orders staff claiming old powers family members, expecting special treatment, or a new royal court spending its first months arguing over promises made during the previous reign. Catherine reopened the appendix and turned to the last page. Beneath the earlier warnings lay the legal foundation for the decision. She pointed out that the rule had not been written by William or created by her. It came from a reform approved months earlier. Its purpose was to ensure that royal titles, households, official residences, and public funding remained connected to active royal duties. Charles himself had signed that reform. He leaned forward as the room fell silent. Catherine placed her finger under his signature and explained what no one had yet said aloud. William was not inventing a new rule against Camilla. He was applying a rule Charles had personally approved. If Charles now tried to create an exception for his wife, he would have to admit that the reform applied to everyone except the woman sitting beside him. Camilla slowly turned to face the king. This time, Charles could not avoid her eyes. He stared at his own signature as though he barely recognized it. When the reform had first been introduced, it had seemed straightforward. Make the monarchy smaller. Remove unnecessary roles. Link public funding to active service and prevent royal households from growing larger than required. Camilla listened to the explanations but refused to accept them. She said the palace was concealing a personal choice behind constitutional language. No rule had forced William to act at that moment. There was no emergency requiring Catherine to stand beside him. In her view, they had chosen the timing because they wanted the matter settled before Charles could protect her. William remained silent for a moment before opening another section of the file. The proposed reform had already been entered into the official succession planning records. Copies had been sent to the legal office, the private secretaries, and the advisors preparing for the next reign. It was no longer a private understanding between Charles and his staff. It had become part of the formal process that would guide the transfer of power. That changed the situation entirely. Charles still possessed the authority to alter the policy while he remained king. But any change made solely to protect Camilla's position would be obvious to everyone. It could not be hidden or presented as a routine update. The official documents were already on record. Just then, the door opened, and Princess Anne entered without formal announcement. She had been invited to review the reform because of her long experience with royal households and her service under 2 different monarchs. Before entering, she already knew the principal arguments and understood exactly where the weakness lay. Anne looked at Charles before looking at Camilla. She reminded him that a reform only carries real value if the person who introduces it is also prepared to accept its limits. A monarch could not ask the family to accept discipline-reduce royal households and question long-standing traditions only to set those same rules aside when they affected his own wife. Charles replied that Camilla was not simply another member of the royal family. Anne agreed, but said that was precisely why the rules needed to be clearer, not weaker. Camilla accused Anne of taking William and Catherine's side against her. Anne calmly rejected the claim. Personal feelings were not the issue. The real issue was that one royal office belonged to the current reign, while another would belong to the next. Mixing the two would leave staff advisors and family members uncertain whose authority they should follow. The danger was not dramatic, but administrative, and that made it more serious. A palace does not require a public argument to become disordered. It needs only one disputed order, one appointment challenged by another office or one family member promised access that the next monarch refuses to honor. William understood that risk. Catherine did as well. She pointed to the section of the document dealing with the order of precedence. If Camilla retained the same practical status as queen after Charles's reign, where would that leave the next queen, who would be given the first speaking role at official events? Which royal household would control the staff? Which office would receive foreign guests? Camilla said Catherine was merely protecting her own future place as queen. Catherine did not deny it. She replied calmly that the next reign required clear rules, not competition. Ensuring clarity was part of her duty, just as supporting King Charles had been part of Camilla's. The legal advisor then delivered the final assessment that no amount of goodwill could alter. The plan was legally valid. The official succession records were complete. The policy removing Camilla's automatic authority after Charles's reign had already been approved. Charles could object. He could request another review or even attempt to replace the plan. He could not erase the existing record or remove the reasons that had produced it. Camilla pushed the folder away. She demanded that Charles cancel the decision before anyone outside the room learned of it. William finally looked directly at her. He said Charles could protest and delay the process, but he no longer possessed the power to make the decision disappear quietly. It had already become part of the plans for the future. Camilla stopped looking at Charles and turned to William. For the first time that evening, there were no advisors' papers or legal terms between them. The question became simple and personal. Was he truly prepared to remove her from her future position? William answered without emotion. He said the decision was not about his personal feelings toward Camilla. It was about ensuring the next reign remained stable. The succession plan had already been approved. The decision had been made. His duty was to carry it out, not to pretend it did not exist. Camilla then looked at Catherine, who confirmed William's words without hesitation. She said the next royal court could not begin with two people holding unclear authority. Camilla would always be treated with respect and honored for standing beside Charles. But the authority that came with being queen would end when Charles's reign ended. That was the moment no one in the room could reverse. Charles stood and walked toward the window. For years he had defended Camilla against public criticism, private opposition, and the lasting weight of the past. Now the greatest challenge to her future was no longer coming from outside Buckingham Palace. It was coming from the future king himself. Charles suggested a compromise. Camilla could still use a ceremonial royal title after his reign. Her staff would be smaller, but not entirely removed. She could retain a reduced household. She would lose official authority, yet still be publicly recognized with the dignity of a queen. For a brief moment, the room felt calmer. Then William rejected the idea. He explained that even ceremonial titles could carry real influence. Staff followed important titles. Officials showed respect according to rank. Family members expected special access because of them. A title that appeared merely symbolic could quickly become an unofficial position of power if people continued to act as though nothing had changed. Catherine offered a more limited solution. Camilla would receive private respect, appropriate security, and a stable place to live. None of those arrangements, however, would grant her authority over the next royal household. She would not control appointments, issue orders to senior staff, or claim any constitutional rights. Camilla heard only one message beneath the carefully chosen words. She believed they were reducing her role. She had spent many years facing criticism before finally becoming queen. The press secretary then entered with a draft public statement. It did not mention the removal of Camilla's authority. It did not mention William Catherine or the disagreement. Instead, it described the decision as a simple constitutional clarification concerning the organization of royal households in the next reign. Charles asked where he needed to sign. The legal advisor calmly explained that no further signatures were required. Months earlier, Charles had already authorized the plan to proceed. The Palace Council had completed its review, and the succession file had already been officially recorded. William and Catherine were not seeking approval. They were confirming that the existing rules would now be applied. Camilla froze. In that moment, everything she believed about the meeting changed. She had thought Charles could still protect her with a single decision. She had believed the king remained the last person standing between her and the future William intended to create. That power was already gone. Perhaps Charles had not fully realized it. Perhaps he had not intended the outcome. Either way, the result was the same. The final page was placed in front of Camilla. Near the bottom were Charles's initials beside the original approval for the reforms. She recognized his handwriting at once. Her eyes rose slowly from the page to Charles, who stood quietly near the window. Under the soft light, he looked less like a powerful king and more like a husband confronting a painful truth. Camilla gently touched his initials with one finger. The room remained silent. William did not speak. Catherine remained quiet. Even Anne said nothing. Camilla finally asked Charles whether he had known about all of this. Before Charles could answer, the legal advisor closed one folder and revealed another sealed document beneath it. No one had mentioned it earlier. The name written on the front was Catherine's. Although her name appeared on the document, she had not written it herself. It was a memorandum prepared after a private meeting she had attended with constitutional advisors planning for the next reign. The decision had already been made. The record already existed. And the future of Camilla's title after Charles's reign had been settled long before she entered the room.